The moment everything halts, Dokja finds himself surrounded by a thick, suffocating smoke, but his eyes never leave Pildo. Slowly, the smoke begins to clear, revealing Dokja still standing firm. His sword, glowing with a blue aura, is drawn and held at the ready. He stands undeterred, not even flinching at the attacks. A notification flashes before him, informing him that his strength and durability have increased thanks to the power of his sword. Of course, Pildo would never expect this kind of surprise from someone he's underestimated. Pildo, who had been scribbling away at his papers, finally looks up and asks Dokja what he wants. His voice lacks the confidence it once had. Dokja's stats take a hit due to Pildo's skill, but the effect doesn't rattle him. He makes it clear that he's not interested in becoming a squatter again. Meanwhile, Pildo's weapons keep firing away, still alive and reloading. Talk about relying on cheap tricks instead of real skill. Pathetic. Hyeongseong notices the weapons starting to fire and bolts toward Dokja, ready to help. Pildo watches with a smug grin as Dokja and Hyeongseong refuse to run, clearly not intimidated. But then, out of nowhere, someone rushes in, only to get injured in the process. Dokja notices the man's wound, a deep cut from a sword. As Hyeongseong reaches his side, he inquires about the man's condition, but Dokja silently observes, listening to the exchange between the man and Pildo. Pildo's grin only grows wider, no doubt relishing in the chaos. It turns out the man was injured by G. Dokja meets Hyeongseong's gaze, a determined look in his eyes. He knows this is the moment to set everything in motion. Hyeongseong looks at his bare hand, and a notification confirms that his attribute is evolving. With a clenched fist, golden light envelops him, signaling the birth of one of Tessa's strongest protagonists. Pildo's smugness starts to fade as he realizes too late that he's been outplayed. Dokja's plan has worked perfectly. From the sidelines, he watches with a hint of amazement as Hyeongseong's power grows. A massive iron hand materializes behind Hyeongseong, a manifestation of his newfound strength. With this power, Hyeongseong is set to become one of the strongest characters in Tisa. With a newfound determination and confidence, Hyeongseong is reborn. The hard manifestation slowly absorbs into him, and with it, his great mountain-crushed stigma fully blooms. In that instant, his muscles bulge so massively that they tear through his shirt. He screams with power, aiming his fist at the floor and slamming it down with such force that the entire ground shakes, breaking apart under his strike. Pildo and his gang stand frozen in shock as the floor beneath them begins to crack, tiles shattering and flying into the air. The zone that Pildo had so carefully set up is destroyed in an instant. His room, once a symbol of his control, is devastated by a blinding light. Dokja watches in silence, unfazed by the destruction, while Hyeongseong struggles to catch his breath after unleashing his power. Then, unexpectedly, Hyeongseong turns to Dokja, expressing a desire to hear his story too. It's a surprising request. Dokja never thought someone like Hyeongseong would be interested in his past. Before they can continue, a voice calls out from the rubble. Both Hyeongseong and Dokja move toward the source, and when they peer down, they find Pildo somehow alive but badly wounded. Dokja can't help but smile at the sight of the once smug villain now lying defeated in the debris. He takes the opportunity to ask Pildo if they can talk now that the private space he protected so fiercely is gone. The entire station is in chaos, the floor in ruins and people injured from the destruction. Dokja strolls through the wreckage, noticing that Hwon and the others have joined them. Hwon informs him that they've managed to destroy every safe zone in the station. This was exactly what Dokja had planned from the start. He can't hide his satisfaction. He and Hyeongseong took down Pildo's zone as a team, effectively toppling the house of cards Pildo had built. Despite the ringing in his ears from Byung's complaints about destroying the safe zone, Dokja flashes a bright smile. He tells Byung to be quiet as he's been receiving plenty of messages from the constellations, messages of approval and happiness over the success of his plan. Pildo, for all of his cunning and manipulation, has finally been outmatched. The game has shifted, and the true power players are stepping forward. Byung, not missing a beat, reminds Dokja that Chungmuro has many channels and most of its viewers are thrill seekers. In other words, the people are just waiting for something to go down. Meanwhile, Pildo's gang, or what's left of it, carries him away, clearly shaken by the turn of events. Dokja then notices Jihee making her way over, proudly announcing that she has destroyed the safe zone with a higher capacity. Dokja had known all along that his team wouldn't be able to handle the bigger zones on their own, so he asks Jihee to take care of them, but his request sparks anger among the others. Of course they're angry. Everyone's just itching for a fight, but Dokja's playing a long game. The atmosphere shifts. The whole station seems to be coming for them now, and just when things couldn't get more chaotic, a bounty hunter scenario pops up. Everyone gets the notification, a 10-minute deadline to kill Dokja. The announcement is almost laughable. It's clear that the chaos is only getting started. Choi, ever the lone wolf, is the first to declare she won't be helping Dokja, turning her back and walking away. Dokja doesn't bat an eye and closes the window. He doesn't need her help. Let her walk off, the self-righteous pretender. Hyeongseong can't resist teasing Dokja about how he's gotten himself into this mess. She jokes that if the bounty was 20,000 coins, she might consider turning on him. Hyeongseong, on the other hand, immediately steps up to protect him. Dokja glances at Hyeongseong, his shield raised, and takes a moment to observe the man's profile. Hyeongseong may be a strong ally, but his stigma can only be used twice more. And then, just as things seem tense enough, more people begin arriving. They've all received the hunting scenario and the pressure mounts. Jung-hyeok flinches at the sight of the growing crowd, but Dokja reassures him, telling him they won't fight. They're not here to brawl. It's about survival. His party surrounding him stands ready to protect him with weapons in hand. But in the back of Dokja's mind, he can't help but recall a similar situation in Teso when Jung-hyeok destroyed the safe zones. The memory is fresh, the stakes even higher. Suddenly, the railway begins to glow red, and the gateway appears. Another twist, another hurdle. The game isn't done with them yet. A notification flashes in front of everyone, announcing that the scenario conditions have been adjusted due to the destruction of the safe zones. The next notification sends a chill down their spines. They now have to survive the night against the monsters or they will die. The gate creaks open and the monsters begin to appear. The crowd is stunned by the horrifying sight, and before they can even react, one of the unlucky few is devoured. Panic erupts as people start fleeing for their lives. It doesn't take long for the station to be overrun by the monsters. The chaos grows as more and more people scramble for safety. Amid the mayhem, Dokja shouts at his party, urging them to make their way up the stairs. They manage to climb, but something catches his attention. They stop on the stairs when Dokja notices that they're being followed by a group of people. With a calculated look, he drives his sword through the stairs, causing them to crack. He knows that escaping upstairs won't save them. The stairs tremble, then explode. Everyone who had been trailing them is forced to flee, scrambling away from the blast. Dokja's party stands in stunned silence as they witness the destruction. The hole in the stairs is now a permanent barrier. No one else will be coming up. Dokja doesn't waste time. He tells everyone to fight for their survival. The group starts looking for another way up, but before they can even plan their next move, Hyeongseong is already ahead of them, using his fist to destroy another set of stairs. Jung-hyeok, clearly frustrated, confronts Dokja about his decisions, but Dokja remains unfazed, assuring them that he's got everything under control. He activates his bookmark skill, scanning his list. He has access to Namwoon, Hyeongseong, and Inho's skills, each one an asset in the right moment. Dokja decides to activate Inho's insider skill for 5 minutes. With a smirk, he calls Pildo, his voice dripping with intent. He incites the remaining survivors, promising them that he can save them. Pildo, predictably, fumes with anger. But soon, everyone who had been scrambling in fear turns their eyes to Dokja, begging for his help. They know the monsters are dangerous, but they're more terrified of what's going to happen next. Dokja reassures them that the monsters are not the real challenge here. They can be beaten if they work together. He knows the real obstacle is the loss of the safe zones. More and more people begin to swarm Pildo, begging for his help. Spotting a rat scurrying in the corner of his eye, probably another poor soul trying to flee, Pildo orders everyone to gather around him. He demands they hold back the monsters as he prepares his private property skill. So the group starts fighting back, armed with whatever they can find. If it weren't so serious, it would almost be comical how little of a chance they stand against the oncoming wave of monsters. Just then, someone is about to be devoured by one of the beasts. Dokja spots the scene and immediately tells Sangha to help. With a quick, practiced motion, Sangha uses her thread to yank the man away from the monster's jaws, pulling him to safety on the stairs. The man's back is marred by a deep claw mark, but he's alive thanks to Sangha. Their eyes meet, and for a brief moment, Dokja sees the man's desperation. He's not just grateful to be alive. He's eyeing the bounty reward that's still hanging in the air. His smile widens as he asks the man about the bounty scenario, but as soon as the question leaves his lips, the scenario ends. The man is too late. It's almost tragic how predictable his behavior is. The man's face goes pale as he realizes his mistake, and he immediately apologizes only to be bullied by Sangha, Hyeongseong, and Gillian. The poor guy's pride is crushed before he even gets a chance to blink. Just then, Pildo screams out in desperation as he activates his skill, summoning his Gatling gun to surround the group. The monsters, relentless in their pursuit, are now under a hail of bullets. Pildo might have activated a strong weapon, but it's clear he's still on the back foot. Hyeongseong, who has just arrived, watches in awe at the display, his eyes widening at the sight of Pildo's weapon. Dokja isn't impressed, though. He knows Pildo can survive this fight. His skill doesn't drain much power. The guy's just going to keep blasting away until something changes. Monsters are blown to pieces, but they keep coming, endless and unforgiving. Dokja, sensing that his party might need a break, tells them to rest for a moment. However, Hoo-won looks uneasy, her gaze flicking nervously to the people below. Dokja gives her a reassuring smile, though it's laced with a bit of cynicism. They're not lucky enough, he says, knowing full well that not everyone will make it. Meanwhile, Pildo continues to scream as he exhausts himself, relentlessly firing his weapon. No matter how much power he pours into his skill, the monsters just keep coming. Frustration builds in his eyes, and at the end of his rope, he decides to level up his skill. His weapon grows larger, and a new feature activates a protective wall that prevents the monsters from getting any closer, allowing his guns to keep firing. Dokja watches the scene from the stairs, deep in thought. He wonders how long the constellations will continue to lend Pildo their help. His eyes flick toward the thugs, knowing they're only getting what they deserve. Meanwhile, Jai, ever the smug observer, starts mocking the chaos, clearly enjoying the sight of others suffering. Her words drip with sarcasm, but Dokja isn't bothered. It's almost too easy to tune her out. Hyeongseong, on the other hand, has decided that sleep is the best escape. After days of running, fighting, and surviving, she's curled up on the stairs, seemingly unbothered by the ongoing madness. Dokja, however, isn't in the mood for naps. He turns to Ji, asking her about Jung-hyeok, but she simply shrugs it off, claiming he's busy. Dokja, however, is already one step ahead. He casually reveals that he knows Jung-hyeok has been in the dungeon, and this catches Ji-hee off guard. She's surprised that Dokja knows this, but he doesn't miss a beat. He estimates that Jung-hyeok has been raiding the dungeon for at least 11 hours, and something feels off. Maybe it's just his gut, but Dokja suspects that something's gone wrong. Before he can dwell on it, he asks Byung to open the shop, but Byung is busy, as usual, expanding his channel. Dokja's patience wears thin, and the two end up in a small argument. Naturally, Dokja wins the exchange, offering 5,000 coins to upgrade his membership in the shop. It's a classic move, pay to get what he needs when the others can't be bothered to help. Sanga notices the items that Dokja bought from the shop and raises an eyebrow. She's curious about what they are, but Dokja isn't one for explanations. He's already focused on the bigger picture. The items are a support contract and recovery potions, costing him a hefty 15,000 coins. Byung, ever the skeptic, starts to fret. He's worried that Dokja is about to make another contract, likely with a constellation, but Dokja reassures him with a calm smile, explaining that it isn't for the constellations this time. Dokja writes his name down as the employer on the contract, the pen moving with purpose. Sanga still doesn't understand what's happening, and Dokja doesn't bother to elaborate. Instead, his gaze drifts to Pildo, who's slowly losing strength. With a hint of a grin, he explains to Sanga that the contract has the power to turn an employer into an employee. Despite relentless efforts of Pildo to kill the monsters for an hour, they keep swarming in, showing no sign of retreat. Meanwhile, Hyeongseong and Gilliong return, bringing water and blankets from the restroom, but their presence does little to change the overwhelming chaos. Dokja watches the scene unfold, knowing Pildo's constellation, Defense Master, can't keep up for much longer. He smiles, sensing an opportunity, and calls out to Pildo, who is still being held back by his gang. Dokja offers Pildo a contract, causing both Pildo and Byung to freeze in shock. But the real surprise is that Dokja isn't speaking to Byung. He's addressing the weak, desperate Defense Master. The constellation, battered and tired from keeping Pildo alive, is confused by the offer. Byung, ever the skeptic, can't believe his ears. He questions if Dokja's gone mad, proposing that sponsoring a constellation is unheard of. But Dokja isn't fazed. He calmly explains that Pildo's constellation is running out of coins, making it weaker and weaker. With its stories fading into nothingness, so too will the constellation. Dokja knows exactly how the constellation world works. Constellations grow stronger by spreading their stories through their avatars. The more stories they share, the more coins they accumulate. And when those stories vanish, the constellations fade away with them. It's a simple fact that Byung can't seem to grasp, but Dokja understands it all too well. Pildo, unable to keep standing, begins coughing up blood. Dokja watches silently, his expression unreadable, waiting for the final moment. Sanga, on the other hand, looks worried, but Dokja knows the game is nearly over. Then, just as he expects, Defense Master responds to the offer. Byung is left in stunned silence, witnessing the unexpected turn of events. Defense Master is reviewing the contract, clearly confused but intrigued. Dokja's plan is working flawlessly, and he can't help but smile at the progress. Not long after, a notification pops up and Dokja sees the new clauses added to the contract. Protection and improvements in Pildo's skills, standard stuff. But Dokja isn't interested in that. What he's after is the third clause that states that Pildo's properties will be his too. Dokja, feeling satisfied with the contract, agrees and signs it, sealing the fate of Pildo. Meanwhile, Pildo is barely holding it together, his power completely drained. Just as he's about to collapse, a potion flies toward him, courtesy of Senga. Dokja tells Pildo to take it, and despite his anger, Pildo grabs the potion, uncorks it, and drinks it down without hesitation. The potion works its magic instantly. Pildo's mana is fully restored. He stands up, ready for revenge, but Dokja doesn't even flinch. He simply tells him to be quiet, and in that moment, Pildo's mouth is immediately sealed. Everyone, including Pildo's men, is left stunned. Even Dokja's party is caught off guard by the sudden turn of events. The reason behind it? Authority command, a special clause in their contract. With a grin, Dokja tells Pildo to keep fighting but to stay away from his party. Pildo, still unable to speak, seethes in anger, but there's nothing he can do. Myeongnyang, now realizing what's happening, suspects that Dokja had planned this all along. Dokja merely shrugs, unbothered by Myeongnyang's concerns. The regret is clear on Myeongnyang's face, but it's too late now. And just as Myeongnyang turns to leave, Jai asks where he's going, but he doesn't answer. Dokja, however, has other plans. He turns to Hwon, who has finally woken up, and tells her that he's going after the one responsible for all the suffering they've endured. He's going to give that person a well-deserved kick. Dokja reveals that, according to Taesun, he knows of a time when Jung-hyeok in a certain dungeon endured unimaginable pain and chose to let his life go, opting for another regression. Dokja is stunned to learn that Jung-hyeok gave up in his 8th regression, something that had clearly shattered him. Hwon, now curious, peeks at the thoughts of Dokja, and when she asks who he's talking about, Dokja explains that the man is far worse than Pildo. The severity of what Jung-hyeok has done weighs heavily on his mind. Dokja, now determined, sets off with Hwon and Gillian, making their way forward. He reassures Hwon that everyone will be okay since he's left Sangha and Hyeongseong behind to watch over the others. Dokja, remembering the plan from before, had instructed to give Pildo a potion every 40 minutes, but now his mind was on Jung-hyeok. His worry deepens knowing Jung-hyeok's past failures in the 8th and 11th rounds, and this was now his 3rd. The weight of the situation presses on him, but his thoughts are interrupted when Ji catches up to them and tells them to wait. Dokja feels a sense of relief. Ji's sharpness is something he can count on. She asks to join them, suggesting that Jung-hyeok could be in danger. Dokja knows she's right. He knows Jung-hyeok all too well and can already sense the looming danger. They arrive at Daehan Cinema, and Dokja again asks Ji-hye if Jung-hyeok went into the hidden dungeon at the first exit. Ji hesitates, but Dokja already knows the truth. He can feel the ominous presence as the cinema is surrounded by dark energy. He mutters under his breath that Jung-hyeok might already be dead. The cinema is a gateway to the hidden dungeon scenario, and the dark atmosphere tells him everything he needs to know. Without hesitation, he reaches out and pushes his hand through the barrier surrounding the cinema. The place flickers with dark sparks, and the new scenario appears. They orders them to slay the master of the cinema dungeon. Dokja reads the message and feels the weight of the situation. He realizes he has already given all of his power to stop Jung-hyeok from dying, but it may be too late. They step inside the cinema, and Ji once again questions him. She asks if Jung-hyeok is truly in danger, her skepticism still lingering. But Dokja can't reveal everything. He only says that it's his job as a companion to worry about him. But there's more, he can't share the truth with her yet. And as they walk deeper into the cinema, his mind drifts to a moment from his past. He recalls when his regression count hit double digits and someone asked Jung-hyeok what would happen to the world if he regressed. Jung-hyeok, in his usual detached manner, simply replied that he only had one world, one where everyone could be saved. The weight of that statement haunts Dokja, but he pushes it aside for now. He looks at his party and assures them there are no hidden motives. He's genuinely worried about the fate of the world if Jung-hyeok regresses, especially since there's no mention of it anywhere in teaser. The cinema is eerily quiet, with the once colorful movie posters now torn and faded. Dokja and Gillian both notice the desolation, the atmosphere heavy with an unnatural silence. Dokja urges everyone to go upstairs, and as they make their way, Hwon and Ji-hye strike up a conversation about their favorite weapons. Both of them prefer swords, and immediately they hit it off, their shared love for the blade creating an instant bond. Hwon, noticing Ji's sword, compliments her on it. Jai, in turn, glances at Hwon's weapon, a sword crafted from bone, and the compliment is met with a slight pause. Dokja, feeling guilty for not being able to provide Hwon with a better weapon, sighs inwardly. He turns to Ji, asking her why she couldn't be as polite as Hwon, but Ji just smirks and replies that she only respects incredible women. Dokja, clearly not satisfied with that response, shakes his head. Suddenly, something rustles in Gillian's hair, and without missing a beat, he grabs Dokja, his eyes wide. In an instant, Dokja knows someone is with them inside the cinema. Everyone goes on high alert. The voice breaks the silence from upstairs. 4 men can be heard talking, discussing ripped posters and some hidden treasure they believe lies behind them. Dokja's mind races. He suspects these men are from another station and explains to Ji-hee that each station has its own scenario. The men must have finished their first scenario and snuck in through the ground floor. But what really grabs Dokja's attention is that these men seem to know about the hidden dungeons and prophets, secrets that only he and Jung-hyeok were supposed to know about. Before he can process this new information, the four men, standing in front of an intact poster, are suddenly engulfed in blue light and disappear. Dokja is quick to act, rushing toward the light before it fades. The others are still frozen in shock, unable to fully process what just happened. Dokja stands before the torn posters, his gaze lingering on one that remains untouched. He's frustrated and confused. Jung-hyeok left the poster for the movie a time forgotten by mankind, recreated untouched, and it bothers him deeply. Just as he's about to move, the same blue flash of light envelops them all, leaving Dokja with more questions than answers. Ji-hyeok and Gil-yeon panic when Dokja casually asks Hwon if she enjoys watching movies, hinting that she might start hating them after this experience. The group watches, helpless as the light around them fades, and soon they find themselves transported into an unfamiliar forest. The wind rustles the leaves of towering trees, and the vastness of the forest only adds to the growing sense of unease. Jige, in particular, is thrown off by the sudden change, her confusion turning into panic as she realizes they are in a movie. Dokja, with his usual calm demeanor, reassures her, speculating that Jung-hyeok must have gone ahead and finished every level in the posters, hoping to keep the rewards all to himself. Jige, still trying to grasp what's happening, wonders aloud which movie they are now part of when Gil-yeon suddenly walks off into the woods. Out of nowhere, something emerges from the tall bushes, and the group is left staring in shock. A massive mantis, its eyes gleaming with an unsettling intelligence, stands before them. Jai, being the first to act, pulls her sword, intent on saving Gil-yeon. But before she can swing, Gil-yeon effortlessly avoids her blade and crouches down to speak with the insect, surprising her even more with his calm demeanor. Jai, still bewildered, watches as Gil-yeon casually converses with the ancient bug, laughing with it as though it were an old friend. He's like Shin Henry Faber, Dokja explains, referencing the famous entomologist who was known for his deep understanding of insects. But the moment is interrupted when Gil-yeon's expression shifts. He freezes, as though hearing something alarming from the bug, and quickly calls over to Dokja before releasing the creature. The three of them are now on high alert. Something feels wrong. Before they can process the situation, the ground trembles under their feet. It seems like a huge monster is approaching, causing the earth to shake like an earthquake. Dust billows between the trees, and as the air grows thick with tension, the same group of men they had seen earlier shows up, seeking help. Ji-hyeok and Hwon recognize them, but their shock deepens when they see what's trailing behind them. A massive Tyrannosaurus, its massive frame causing the earth to quiver with each step. The sight of the terrifying creature sends everyone into a panic, and Dokja, though momentarily stunned, is filled with a mix of dread and excitement. He knows the rule of this world: the bigger the obstacle, the greater the reward. The sky vibrates with the deafening roar of the Tyrannosaurus, sending icy chills down everyone's spines. In the chaos, Dokja grabs Gil-yeon, lifting him off the ground, and the two of them sprint away, hoping to outrun the monstrous creature. The roar finally fades, but the earth trembles as the Tyrannosaurus lifts its massive hand, crushing one of the men caught in its path, followed by a deafening boom that rips through the air. The creature's rampage continues, trampling everything in its wake and slaughtering many of the men who were too slow to escape. As it finally notices Dokja and his group, the weight of the situation sinks in. With nowhere to go, Dokja draws his sword, looking at Jay. He calmly tells her that killing the Tyrannosaur is the only way to escape, then points to the research lab behind the beast. When Jay looks confused, he simply explains that this is a movie scenario, and the only way to ensure a satisfying ending is to defeat the monster. The Tyrannosaurus roars again, this time using its terrifying skill to intimidate its prey. Dokja, however, is shielded by his fourth wall skill, his safety secured as the others brace for impact. He orders the group to scatter, then notices that Gil-yeon has activated a skill, the Dinosaur Encyclopedia. After quickly reading the information, Gil-yeon informs Dokja that the Tyrannosaurus has a narrow field of vision, making it vulnerable to attacks from the sides. Dokja, now impressed, is surprised to learn that Gil-yeon had studied dinosaurs when he was younger. Before he can fully process this new information, the Tyrannosaurus charges straight at them, teeth bared. Dokja prepares to give the group instructions, but he doesn't need to. Hwon and Ji-hyeok, ever the battle-hardened warriors, immediately dash toward the towering dinosaur with swords drawn ready to strike. But the Tyrannosaurus seems to have fixed its gaze on Dokja, charging at him with deadly intent. Dokja knows he can't take it on alone. He needs to distract it, so that Hwon and Ji-hye can land the killing blow. Just as he's about to make a move, Gil-yeon steps forward, offering himself as the distraction. Green sparks begin to glow around him as he activates his skill, trying to convince Dokja that he's capable of holding the dinosaur's attention long enough for the others to strike. A giant mantis suddenly appears above them, wings flapping as it rapidly approaches the Tyrannosaurus. In an instant, it claws at the beast's eyes, causing it to roar in pain as its eyes begin to bleed. Dokja, taken aback by the sight, is left speechless. It becomes crystal clear to him why Jung-hyeok wanted to take Jung-hyeok. This was no ordinary companion. He quickly turns to Jihye and Huiwon, informing them that they were now in a prime position to strike. Both warriors spring into action, executing a flawless technique that cleaves through the Tyrannosaur's limb in a single powerful strike. Meanwhile, Dokja activates the special skill in his sword, the Ether Affix. The blade morphs into fire, and without hesitation, Dokja climbs up the Tyrannosaur's massive tail. The beast, sensing his movement, begins swinging its tail violently to shake him off. But Dokja, agile and determined, leaps into the air, sword pointed directly at the creature's back. With a swift and decisive motion, Dokja plunges the flaming sword deep into the Tyrannosaur's flesh. Gravity works in his favor as he descends, allowing the sword to carve even deeper into the monster's body. Huiwon and Jilliong watch with concern, but Dokja is relentless. He channels more mana into the blade, causing the flames to intensify and tear through the dinosaur's skin like hot knife through butter. The Tyrannosaur roars once more in agony, but this time, the fire quickly engulfs its entire body. Dokja pulls the sword free just as the Tyrannosaur's roar fades into silence. He lands gracefully beside Jihye, his sword still glowing with residual heat. The Tyrannosaur, now nothing more than a charred carcass, crashes to the ground with a deafening thud. The smell of roasted meat fills the air. Even Jilliong and Huiwon can't help but notice how strangely appetizing it is despite the carnage. And as the dust settles, Dokja and his party are awarded 1,000 coins for their efforts in slaying the Tyrannosaurus. With the battle over, Dokja turns his attention to one of the survivors, a man struggling to breathe. Dokja kneels beside him, offering him water, but the man can barely drink, coughing violently as blood pours from his mouth. Dokja knows this man's time is short. With urgency in his voice, he asks the dying man how did they know about this place. The dying man reveals that a group of so-called prophets were guarding something called a revelation. He's stunned by the mention of this, but before he can process the full implications, the man succumbs to his injuries, leaving Dokja speechless. Realizing the man was already gone, Dokja respectfully covers the body with leaves. And as he reflects, Dokja realizes how absurd the situation is. Only Aniplot, a true prophet, could actually foresee the future. These people were no prophets at all. They were likely someone like him, individuals who knew the future, but not through divine sight. With this unsettling information, Dokja decides they should take a break and rest for a while. During the brief respite, Dokja finds 20 potions, stamina, mana, agility, and strength potions stashed away in the area. The discovery is a welcome one, and as he surveys his party, he notices they are happily devouring the Tyrannosaur's meat. When Ji finishes her meal, her eyes land on what Dokja is doing. She immediately closes the distance, and before Dokja can react, she accuses him of trying to hoard all the potions. Calling Huiwon over, she demands the strength potion, even though Dokja knows her strength is already one of her greatest assets. Not wanting her to take the potion, especially because of her connection to Jung-hyeok, he decides to offer a challenge instead. He suggests they play for it, using his Omniscient reader skill to gain an advantage. With the game set, Dokja feels confident in his chances, already knowing how he can defeat her. As the game progresses, a helicopter suddenly arrives and the group starts heading toward it. Huiwon is still uncertain whether the movie has ended, but Dokja reassures her that it's over. Meanwhile, Jihye, still perplexed by her loss, rumbles about not receiving the potion. Just then, a notification flashes in front of everyone, confirming that they've successfully delivered the desired ending to the scenario. Huiwon watches in surprise as Dokja calmly explains that the key to their survival is simply to kill everything in their path. Meanwhile, Jilliong bids farewell to the mantis, knowing he can't bring it along. They can only take items with them like the potions, most of which Dokja holds. Jihye, however, has nothing, leaving her with nothing to work with in this deadly game. Jilliong's eyes light up when he spots an ampule that will significantly boost his stats. But just as quickly as his excitement flares, he realizes it's only usable inside the cinema dungeon. Dokja stares at it, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He knows that without this ampule, finishing the final level will be near impossible. Dokja clenches the ampule tightly, the stakes of Jung-hyeok's potential danger pushing him to act decisively. He knows that if Jung-hyeok is truly in peril, he can't afford to hesitate. Not now. The urgency spikes within him. The helicopter hums to life, its engines roaring as it lifts off the ground. As they ascend, a notification pops up, informing the group that they've completed the movie scenario and earned 500 coins. The forest below starts to fade as they rise higher, the scene melting away like a forgotten dream. The bright blue light flashes, and the torn poster signals their return to the cinema. Hee-won and Ji stare at the ripped remnants of the poster, realizing the significance. The world they've just lived through has ended, and now they have to move on. Dokja encourages them to keep pushing forward, determined to finish the story. The cinema, which once served as a mere exit from Chungmura Station, has now morphed into a multi-floor theater dungeon that stretches from basement to rooftop. As they ascend, it becomes clear Jung-hyeok has already torn down posters on the second and third floors, a reminder that time is ticking. When they finally reach the fourth floor, Jae starts feeling nauseous as the air shifts, signaling the beginning of a new dungeon. The group steps onto the deck of a ship, a Titanic-like vessel, where Hee-won quickly becomes the leading actress. But as the ship sways, Ji can barely keep it together, vomiting while Dokja tries to process the bizarre situation. Was Ji supposed to be the protagonist? She doesn't seem like it. Suddenly, someone calls out the name Jack, pointing at Gil-yeong. It dawns on them. Gil-yeong is the leading actor in this story. The party doesn't have time to celebrate their new roles, though, as they quickly realize they've captured the antagonist in Titanic and now have to decide their next move. Simply finishing the ending won't be enough. The scenario's theater master is a psycho, and they need to deal with him to escape. Ji, with an unsettling calm, suggests killing the antagonist. Her cold-blooded approach catches everyone off guard, especially Dokja. Hee-won is visibly conflicted, unable to come to terms with the human aspect of the antagonist, but Jae isn't swayed. Without hesitation, she drives a knife into the antagonist, satisfying the theater master's twisted desires. Everyone stands stunned by the brutality of it all. Ji turns to Dokja, urgency in her voice. They can't waste any more time. Jung-hyeok might be in danger. She demands they speed through the rest of the stories, a suggestion that makes Dokja pause. He reflects on his own role in this chaotic scenario, a mere player in a world where characters from novels and real people are twisted together in a disaster of their own making. And as they move on, they find the fifth floor empty of movies. It's not another story waiting to be played out. Instead, it's a reward room, signaling a temporary respite, or perhaps a trap. Dokja realizes that the storage room is filled with various movie props. They may not match the value of his sword, but they pack a punch in terms of power. Hee-won is instantly captivated by the Mikazuki Mumekika sword. It's sharp, light, and practically calls out to her. She decides to keep it, and Dokja directs her to pick a weapon for Sanga. He, on the other hand, grabs a shield for Hyeongseong. Soon after, Dokja hears Ji-hee struggling to lift Mjolnir, Thor's legendary hammer. He teases her about the hammer's exclusivity, claiming it can only be wielded by special people. Gil-yeong, overhearing this, picks up a hat. Curious, he tries it on and approaches the others. Ji-ae, annoyed, scolds him for grabbing her items when he snatches the handle and effortlessly lifts it from his box. Both Ji-ae and Dokja are left stunned. Gil-yeong, the lucky little thief, wants to keep the hat, and Dokja doesn't object. This leaves Ji even more flabbergasted, watching as Hee-won and Gil-yeong walk away with incredible weapons while she's left with nothing. Hee-won then turns to Dokja, asking what items he would choose for himself. Dokja pauses for a moment, lost in thought, before something catches his eye. He picks a reinforced armor suit that boosts his agility. After donning it, he directs everyone to move out. On the rooftop, they find Jung-hyeok, standing with a blank stare and empty eyes. It's clear he's been hypnotized. With no time to lose, Dokja and the others rush up the stairs, having finished the movies on the 6th floor, but Jung-hyeok is nowhere to be found. Fortunately, the group receives a reward in the form of a skill book called Sharp Observation. Dokja is the first to step foot onto the 7th floor, only to be surprised to see that all the movie posters are already torn. He rushes through the floor with his party trailing behind him, hoping that no more movies remain intact to slow them down. Out of nowhere, his eyes catching movie posters still hanging on the wall, untouched and in need of completion. A beam of light suddenly shoots from it, enveloping the entire party. Dokja curses under his breath, frustration rising as he realizes that finishing these movies will eat up precious time they can't afford to waste. The sharp scent of the ocean fills the air, and he immediately wonders which movie they've walked into this time. Before he can even process it fully, the ocean below them swirls into a violent whirlpool. A voice shouts, urging everyone aboard to get down and protect themselves. Dokja reacts instantly, raising his shield to block the incoming bullets as enemy soldiers from another ship begin firing. Hee-won and Gil-yeong quickly duck, doing their best to stay low and avoid getting hit. The chaos intensifies. An order is given to turn the ship around, but it's too late. The ship is already in ruins, torn apart by their relentless assault. Parts of it are burning, consumed by the heat of the battle. Hee-won and Gil-yeong seek refuge behind Dokja's shield, hoping for some semblance of protection. Meanwhile, Dokja silently curses Jung-hyeok for leaving them with the hardest movie to clear, questioning if the universe really had to make it this difficult. This battle, known in history as the Battle of Myeongnyang, isn't unfolding in their favor. It's become a grueling test of survival and strategy, and Dokja can't help but wonder why the villains always seem to pick the toughest scenarios. If only they'd face something a little easier for once. Hyeon points out dozens of ships rapidly approaching them, her voice filled with disbelief and anxiety as she wonders aloud how they're supposed to defeat all of them. The ship they're on is violently pulled into the whirlpool, and the enemy ships close in. Dokja, trying to stay composed, turns around to assess the situation, but to his shock, there are no ships behind them. According to the historical records, there should still be 12 more ships remaining, so this feels off. His mind races with possibilities as he approaches one of the soldiers still alive, asking where their general, Sun Lee, is. The soldier looks at him blankly and, clearly confused, has no idea who General Lee is. Surprised and frustrated, Dokja starts to wonder aloud if the Master Theater can actually change the content of the story, and if they could now be forced to win the war without the legendary General Sun Lee. For a brief moment, Dokja stands still, his thoughts heavy. He glances over at Hyeon, who is dutifully protecting Gillian, and calls out to Ji. Dokja remembers the book he had read earlier on the 6th floor and recalls how Ji seemed to have been chosen by Admiral Lee as his avatar. He asks why Admiral Lee would select someone like her, especially when she's prone to seasickness every time they're on a boat. I hope that you liked today's video, and if you did, hit that like button, as today's like goal is 1,500 likes. Comment next part down below to see what happens next. Also, consider subscribing with the notification bell on to get notified as soon as a new video drops onto the channel. You can also join the channel to support me financially and watch videos before public release. I'll meet you in the next video. Until then, thanks for watching.